All right, welcome back to the Gateway Defense Podcast. I'm your host, Brennan Brennick. With me, as always, is my co-host, Justin Anderson. We run a company called Gateway Defense. We travel the country teaching folks what we know about shooting, as well as working together to produce high-quality content for our YouTube channel, revolving around the topic of performance shooting. In today's episode, we're going to be talking about our latest training class that we attended, which was with the great Eric Grauffel, who is a 9-time IPSC World Champion. And joining us in the discussion today are two guests who both attended the class as well. We have Donovan Moore of Point One Tactics and Sean Griffith of Griffith Shooting Solutions. Guys, welcome to the show.
Appreciate you. Thank you
for having us.
Yeah, absolutely. For those of you, or for those listeners who might not know who you guys are, if you would, just go ahead and give everybody just a brief synopsis of who you are and what you do, just to give people some context for kind of what we're going to be chatting about today.
Sure. I appreciate you guys having us on. My name is Donovan Moore with Point One Tactics. Background, a little bit of military life. Got out of the military and thoroughly enjoyed shooting. So I got pretty heavily deep into the performance community at my home range, Alpha Range. A lot of GMs, national guys that are at that level, and kind of took me under my wing a little bit, and I went under their wing, and I didn't stop, right? So I got pretty excited about that, wanted to teach also, so started teaching a little bit. I think teaching really took that overside of performance and being able to shoot competitions, and now I'm trying to get back into it as much as I can. So I teach, I travel, and trying to do a little bit more competitions to hold myself accountable as much as I can. So that's what I'm doing.
Fantastic. Right. Fantastic. And you're teaching full time, right?
Full time. Yep. Try and do it.
Okay.
It's crazy. It gets busy, but yep, that's what I'm doing right now.
That's awesome. That's awesome. That's awesome. Well, thanks for being on here today. Sean, how about you?
My name's Sean Griffith. I also teach. I'm full-time firearms for DHS right now, all law enforcement stuff. And then I teach outside for performance shooting. Got pretty heavily into the competitive world 5-6 years ago, and plugging away best I can.
Very cool. Both of these guys are super humble. They're both stud shooters. Sean is nationally competitive in USPSA, and so it was really cool to get to one, take the class with you, and learn from you guys as well. And then two, just be able to bounce ideas off of you guys from stuff that we were picking up, and being able to chat in the evenings and over dinner and things. That was a real treat for us, for sure. Let's just kind of jump right into it. I don't think this episode is going to be as structured per se as some of the other episodes that we've done or are planning to do. There's a lot that kind of went down at that class. I think Eric's class is not super traditional in the sense of signing up for your typical 2-day performance shooting class or something like that. He has done a very good job of tailoring the class specifically to each group that he's taught for the last couple of years, as far as I have been able to tell. Donovan, you were able to train with him last year as well. We were in different class sessions, but you were there last year. And then I believe I was maybe the couple of days just prior to you. And I think he ran pretty much a different class for both of us, back to back, those 4 days of teaching. And then this year, our class was completely different from the first year. And then Sean and Justin, you guys were not there last year, but you jumped into a class of 6 returning students, and then plus you guys, right? So I guess I'd just be interested. Maybe we can just kind of go around. Maybe we can start with Donovan, and then Sean, and then Justin, and just kind of talk about our experiences, what we thought overall of the class. Maybe we can talk about some standout stuff. If there's something interesting that comes up, we can all kind of pitch in. But yeah, let's talk about the class. What was valuable? What stood out to us?
All right, yeah. Let's see. Eric Grauffel, the GOAT. Grauffel was, I would say, he is the individual in my shooting journey so far where he absolutely lived up to everything that he portrays on the competition side of shooting, right? So like when you think of, you introduced him as the 9-time IPSC World Champion, 27 years and running, whatever that, I think it's about every 3 years. And like, I think about somebody like that, and I expect something that is just beyond what I've seen. I trained with him last year. I trained with him this year, and he absolutely delivered that and more on both of those years. You know, last year, you're right. I think our classes were a little bit different flavor. And I don't know if that was based off of his original assessment. I think we started at the beginning with the same accuracy drills that he likes to do, right? And then maybe he gets a good judge of what somebody's looking like out of the holster. I think he has a special gift to be able to tell that. And then he kind of tailors it to the students. Whereas this year, we were all returning students, and we grabbed Sean, we grabbed Justin, brought him in. And it was one of those things where, you know, Buck, awesome, thanks, Strapped USA and Buck for hosting them. But it was kind of that group chat. It's like, what do you guys want to do? All right. A couple of us were like, let's shoot 3,000 rounds and go freaking crazy. A couple of us were like, let's work on stages, competition, and let him just nitpick us while we nitpick each other and give each other honest feedback. And I think it was very cool to see him be able to deliver what we wanted. We wanted the ability to run a stage. All of us have ran stages before. All of us are ranked USPSA shooters. I think all of us were able to compete at a high level, some higher than others. But he specifically selected stages that allowed us to do whatever we wanted. That was unique. It wasn't, let's put up this, you know, center port stage where we have to reverse lean. It's a no-brainer. Let's put up this traditional T where we start in the middle. We're going to make up ground with the draw, and you have to go left or you have to go right. You know, the traditional L where you're just going to free flow all the way down. There's just no other way to do it. He's like, I'm going to put something up. You know, he scared us a little. If you guys remember that, he gave us this little brief and talked to us all. We all kind of looked at each other. We're like, oh, all right, we're already ready to get our stuff pushed in, right? So I found it very unique that he allowed us to really flourish our strengths and then also allow our weaknesses to be shown. And he left nothing on the table. He was not about perfection. In his world, perfection doesn't exist, but he demanded excellence, which is really, really cool. I've been with a lot of instructors that spoke almost too kindly, like, hey, you're doing good. Hey, you're doing good. Hey, let's fix on this, or whatever it may be, right? Try to keep your spirits up.
Sure.
If Eric wanted to crush you a little bit, he crushed you because you deserved it, right? And I got the good brunt end of that a handful of times. But when you did all right, and you may have thought it was really good, he'll say, it was pretty good. That was all right. And I thought that was very, very cool. So he kept you super honest. You know, he lets you know you're not where you need to be, and this is why. Or you are here. Don't worry about this. Come visit it every once in a while, and this is why. Very, very keen ability. I had an outstanding time. I learned so much. You know, the first class, I'm not talking too much, am I?
No, sir.
All right. The first class was very, very, to me, accuracy driven and mathematically driven. The first initial, right? So it was partial, standing still, draw the gun, enter into position left a couple steps, enter into position right a couple steps, shooting partials. A massive training workshop on swingers, side swingers, apex swingers, right? Opened my eyes to that type of stuff. And then this year, you know, showing up to this, it's like you were expected to have all of this dialed in. You knew that there's specific rules from Grauffel on how to shoot an apex swinger. If you can take it last, take it last. You knew that there was a specific rule on side swingers where if I can take it immediate, you need to take it because it's going to be the most time it shows. Take it on the way down as it pauses. Take it on the way up, right? This is how you enter into position. I've already taught you last year how to move. I got a little bit of a different flavor than most of the U.S. instructors on how they teach. And now this was the class where it was like, let's put it together. And he was all about that. So I love that. And I'm excited. I was a little nervous, not in the sense of being bad or being great. I was a little nervous where it was like, did I put enough work in over the last year to come back for like part 2 of the GOAT? And I'll tell you, October, November was the time frame where I just finally made that decision, because our host, Buck, I'm very good friends with him. I speak out to him on a daily basis. And we always talked about, yep, Eric's coming back. And I kept saying, cool, man. I don't think I'll be there. And it's like, it's one of those things, a personal decision, because I had so much work and homework to take in that I didn't know if I was quite ready. And I think October, November kind of came around and I was like, I'm ready. And I'm really glad I did, because it, as with anything, and as you guys as instructors, you'll know this when you get repeat students, right? Someone will come back and be like, hey, that clicks a little bit more, or I was able to open up a little bit more bandwidth to take in more information. And you guys know I'm not the smartest guy in the world. I think I ask the most questions on hit factor as far as the way he calculates it and how to dumb it down. And, I was very blessed to have such good teammates in there to help me out with that type of stuff. But that's just another thing. It's like, I would never have been able to comprehend that again without the first class. To be able to do all that work. So I thoroughly enjoyed it. I think that's a good opening statement. If I could say one thing, he demands excellence. He does not demand perfection. And he'll talk about that in his one and done and move on, and one and done and move on.
Yep.
Try to look for perfection. You may get better at that one aspect that you didn't do good at, but you're definitely going to have issues on something else. And if you keep chasing that, you're training the wrong way. You're having some issues. And I love his style. So I'll
he's definitely blunt, and he's honest. He doesn't mince words. But it's not in a degrading way. It's not in a just a self-seeking, like I'm so much better than you guys, I can't even stand to watch you shoot type deal. He's very much, you can tell he wants you to do really well. He wants you to succeed, and he gives you feedback that there's zero fluff, and it's for guys who are serious about wanting feedback from somebody who is qualified to give that type of feedback to great shooters, right? Fantastic approach, I think, that he takes with students, for sure. That's really good. We'll get into some of the stuff that you brought up, Donovan, but Sean, I'm curious to hear kind of just overall impression.
I gotta repeat a lot of the stuff that Donovan says, right? Like it was a phenomenal experience. I went into it not having been there last year, knowing that the expectations would be extremely high. And that was obviously met. I thought it was super interesting how little he talked about the technical side of shooting, right? So, for example, you shoot 2 Charlies on a target. It's not, hey, you pushed into the gun, pressing the trigger, your grip pressure wasn't anything like that. It was focus on shooting the alphas. And, lo and behold, the next run, whatever it is, you just focus harder on shooting the alphas, and alphas appeared. It was interesting to me how little technical shooting stuff he talked about, and how much of it fell on the mental side of things, right? Which for me, competing, that's been the biggest hurdle, is the mental side of it. Especially, I think, as you get to the higher levels, it only gets mentally tougher, that how you handle the pressure. And then hearing him talk about the mental side of it, where your technical ability is 25%, how you handle pressure is 25%, and the other 50% of your match performance, your match result, is based in how you strategize, how you do all plan contingencies and do all these mental things. That was eye-opening for me, especially at the playing the USPSA game. And then his talk, I think it was lunch on the first day, where he asked, what's your job on day one? If you're in the top 20 hunting for a nationals win, what's your job on day one? You get all these answers, and it's nope, it's just to stay with the pack, right? What's your job on day 2? Just to stay with the pack. And then day 3, we can start making some decisions, because you're still in the pack and you haven't eliminated yourself from contention. That whole mindset was super interesting to me, in and of itself, right? That was worth that conversation was worth the price of admission for the class, for me, where I'm at in my shooting, hands down. Just to kind of hear that. So I thought it was awesome. The expectations, like Donovan said, were stupid high. I got a lot of those. Hey, that wasn't so good. But it's like you said, it's not in a demeaning way. It's not in, hey, you should be, you're bad at this. It's fix it, just fix it. That's all he wants.
Yeah.
Which was super awesome.
Yeah. I think the I think I know it's intentional, right? To not do this deep dive on technique of how to shoot alphas and what's happening when you're shooting Charlies or Deltas or Mikes, right? Like everybody at that class knew how to shoot points and they knew how to do it fast. And it was so much drilling in the execution of doing things correctly. And so if you did something incorrectly, he wasn't going to walk up and be like, Sean, now I'm going to explain to you why you have a low left Charlie, right? That never happened, right?
Yep.
Because the people in this class did not need that. But they needed the push in the right direction of, what's happening with your mental game to where you feel like it was okay to push hard enough to drop points on this target here. Right. And, I think that makes people think for sure, which is crazy. That's cool. Justin, how about you?
Man, I should have went first. Well, you guys are stealing all my stuff here. So I'm with you, Sean. I wasn't there last year. So going into this, honestly, I was super nervous. I mean, Brendan, you and I had so many phone calls and you were like, bro, I got to get you up to speed here because you did a good job, putting the pressure on me. But yeah, this was so in all fairness, this was also like the first like high level class I've taken in several years. So this was something that I really, really needed. And it was the very first class I've ever taken with like super high level shooters. And that was like that was pivotal for me in part of the learning that I did in this class was watching everyone else and watching how he, dissected everything that everyone else was doing. So it was amazing. So for me, I think my biggest takeaway, by far my biggest takeaway is that consistency is key. That is something that he talked about all the time. Sean, you talked about it as well. The 25%, technical skill, the hard skill of shooting, grip, sights, trigger, all that stuff. And then there's 25%, your mental game, however you digest that. And then 50% is planning and execution. And so like when you have that planning and execution, a lot of that comes down to just how consistently can you do it to a high level. Right. And so hearing him talk about that it resonated with me so much, because I, at this point in my shooting, like I can, hero a stage and then zero the stage the next and maybe not zero it, but not do so good, right? Throw a no shooter or whatever it may be. And although it doesn't necessarily tank my overall match performance, it's really frustrating for me to see the inconsistencies of my performance, right? Like, oh, that would have been such a good stage run if I didn't have that mic. Well, he would come up to you and be like, why did you shoot the mic? Right. And like, you don't necessarily have a good answer, but I really appreciated that he treated every single student like they knew what to do and how to fix it. It was more so like, what are you focusing on and where is your headspace right now? Like, why did you do it in that way? I also kind of went through the class a little bit more unique in like how I stage planned. Being a left-handed shooter, I think I had a different stage plan than everyone, every single stage, except for like the stand and shoot. So that's something that I'm kind of used to be totally honest, at matches. But he never said a word. He never was like, you shouldn't have done that stage plan. He was always like, you made it work. And like, I'm not going to focus on that side of things. So it was very much so not technique based, but principle based. And I love that type of, that training and instruction. Man, I could go on and on, but yeah, I'll leave it at that for now. But I'm amazed at how much meat or how much there is on the table, how much meat there is on the bone, aside from the technical hard skills of shooting. And that is, man, it gets me so pumped to like get back home and work on that stuff, because it's not necessarily, I would say it's the harder side of match performance. I feel like hard skill is a relatively like easy thing when it comes to all this stuff. Like you go home, you rep it out in dry fire, you rep it out in live fire. But like planning, execution, and like mentality, that stuff's really hard to train. At least it is for me. Like that's way harder than hard skill. So yeah, I dig it a lot.
Yeah, that's cool. I would be curious to, maybe we can talk about some of the stuff that we did in the class, maybe some of the drills we shot, or the exercises we were doing. Essentially, for just to give everybody some context. So 2 days of class. Day 1, we shot stages for the morning, right? And then we worked on transitions in the afternoon, right? And then another stage or two. And then the day 2, stages in the morning again. So kind of cold performance. And it was cold in Florida, which was kind of BS, honestly.
I was very disappointed.
But and then so stages in the morning, day 2, and then afternoon we did shooting on the move, right? Pretty much all afternoon. Still kind of doing stage-ish type stuff, but forcing us to do a lot of shooting on the move and things like that, and then ended it out with a stage or two as well. So what did you guys think about that kind of structure? What did you guys think about some of the drills we were doing? And did anything that we do that we practiced kind of change how you guys are now looking at some of your practice?
Yeah, 1,000,000%. I'm not training hard enough.
Yeah, that was a huge takeaway.
Yep, same.
Or I guess I could say I'm not making it difficult enough.
Sure.
Yep.
He made that very clear. I noticed that right away from first class and even second class. He made it hard. As far as the structure went, I thought the structure was great. He said it right. If you guys remember in our chat, we talked a little bit. It's like, let's shoot 3,000 rounds and just really get trigger time with him. He's like, you won't like that. He's like,
I think that was me who suggested that 3,000. Like, let's do it. And I would not have enjoyed that, I don't think. No, I was mentally exhausted, man. So one of the big things about his structure and his style of training that I've since brought to mind is, the difficulty of shooting he presented in pretty much every drill was far more difficult than the shooting that I typically do. But that wasn't the hardest part of it. The hardest part of it for me was the mental side that his drills, every one of his drills required, right? If you remember, we were doing the transition drill, and I think I was the first shooter on the left side. And the first one, he's like plate, partial, plate, open. Oh, okay, no big deal. And I think I remember Randall coming up to me and be like, "Oh, we're just shooting designated target." I was like, "Got this all day. I shoot this all the time."
Easy day.
And three reps into it, it was so complicated. I turned around, I think I looked at you, Donovan. I was like, I don't know what I'm doing anymore, right? So the mental complexity was another big thing that I took away of how demanding mentally even the drills that we were doing were. So that's a big portion that I brought back to my own training, is making stuff mentally taxing as well as technically taxing, and then doing 3-minute walkthrough, 30-second make ready, 30-second make ready, and it's time, the buzzer's going off. And just forcing myself to operate under those circumstances has been, and I can see differences. We're 2-3 weeks out, and I can see differences already in just my ability to retain those plans and that kind of stuff. So, you go to a major match, and I feel like that's going to be very easy now.
Yeah,
for sure.
If I were to piggyback off on that difficulty, it is so mentally draining. When you talk about like that designated target and it just kept getting more difficult. How about day 2? Day 2, he opens up the entire range and he puts down an array of targets, about 24 to 30 targets, right? Riddled with partials, side swingers, opens, close, far, near, hard, you name it. And no fault lines. He's like, let's see how well you can start to look at this. And I'll never forget this. I'm the first shooter on that stage. He goes, you need to come down and shoot all the opens on the way in. And then you're going to come back on the other side and you're going to shoot all the partials coming back on the other side. And I go down, I dive my plan, whatever, we take 2 minutes. And that was the other thing. Everything was accelerated. It was never a true 5-minute walkthrough. It was always shorter. It was almost like if I can get them to do this in 2 minutes, 5 minutes will feel like an eternity, and they'll feel so comfortable within themselves and so confident to deliver. That's like a huge thing I think he was trying to portray into us, right? And I shoot my course of fire, and then I shoot my course of fire, and I'm unloading. He's like, "What are you doing? Make ready for the next one." And all your heads kind of turn, and we had to do it again. So it was essentially 4 runs that we had to plan within whatever 2, 3, 4 minutes of time. It's you talk about mentally taxing with no fault lines, no course of fire that will kind of direct you that way. It was all free flow into your strengths and weaknesses of where you're going to reload, where you're not, and it was all movement. I mean, yeah, to me that was my brain. That's when I was like, we looked at each other. I'm just like, my brain. I'm hurting.
Yeah, for sure. That was something that
very challenging stages.
Yeah, so on the V stage that we did, after the whole shooting on the move kind of exercise clinic, whatever, that it was a 48 round course of fire, and you did it back to back, starting in different positions. And I will never forget my make ready. So Donovan, I'm not gonna lie, I felt really bad for you being the first shooter on that, and none of us knew that that's what we were doing. And I looked, I'm like, I am so glad I'm not Donovan. I
was like this. I was like, thank you.
When he said make ready for the next one, I was like, oh no.
Everybody stood up and they're like, wait, what?
Yeah, I was standing right there because I was filming you, and I'm like, wait, we're doing it again, like back to back. And thankfully he gave us like another minute or something to he's like, all right, another minute, take it. But I mean, it wasn't long. But when it was my turn to shoot, and I was like middle of the pack, I think, like I had plenty of time, and I got up, and he said that my make ready was almost 3 minutes, and I've never once had a make ready even half that length, because in my mind I was like, this is so hard, and I've not visualized this perfectly, and it doesn't feel right. And he's just kind of like, all right, come on, let's go, let's do this thing. And I think I shot it fine. I didn't forget my stage plan, but I will never forget how panicky I was. I'm like, I don't feel comfortable right now, and I normally feel really comfortable with a perfectly visualized stage plan. And he's like, come on, let's go. 20, 30 second, make ready visualization. It should be done by then. Ready to go, off to the races. It was so difficult for me.
What do you think he might be training? Just looking at listening to you explain that and talk, it's almost like he's preparing us for contingencies, which he talked about quite a bit. He was huge on it with his math side on contingencies, but also, yes, you have to be able to flex, right? I come into a stage with my experience versus somebody like Sean at national side. I see him do something. Do I have the ability to flex, make the change? And that should be easy compared to what he put us through, because it's almost like, let's roll and let's see how you go with the fly, right? And when it doesn't go perfect, what are you going to do to fix it,
Mm-hmm. Yeah, something that stood out to me from the last class and this class was that idea of thinking on your feet and being willing to have kind of a fluid stage plan. Various instructors, various kinds of camps of thought, I guess, when it comes to the performance shooting and actually shooting stages, at least for classes from instructors here in the US. Something that I feel has been preached to me over and over is pick a plan, any plan, right? But pick your plan and then just memorize it until you can't memorize it anymore. And you just do that enough, and then just make sure you stick to your plan, right? But what it doesn't do is it doesn't account for any mistakes, right? And I think what I see in my own shooting, and I see this in a lot of other people's shooting as well, is as soon as I make a mistake, I've only visualized that one outcome, the one way the stage could have gone. And so as soon as something doesn't go according to plan, and that could be anything, that could be a malfunction, that could be an unplanned reload, it could be a range equipment malfunction, anything, right? All of a sudden that disrupts that flow that mental flow that I had. And the rest of my stage is all off, right? And that's just, I think that's a flaw in training of only being able or willing or ready or planning to do it one way. And I think if, from based on the conversations we had with him, he's got, contingencies for his contingencies. Right. And I think we even saw that when he shot some of those stages, something didn't quite go right. A popper didn't fall like it should have. And he just was thinking on his feet, bounced back, had something else he could shoot. He didn't just stop there and wait for something to get fixed. Like he just kept going. Right. And I think that's a huge problem for a lot of shooters on stages. And but that requires an entirely different level of planning or complexity of planning. Right now, you can't just pick one stage plan. You have to go, well, if this doesn't happen or this target's not available, then I'm going to shoot these over here. Right. And maybe the top guys are already doing that. Most of them probably are, but certainly for shooters at my level, I think that is not happening for the most part. And man, I think that saves you from disaster and lets you kind of stay in that consistent spot of your consistent performance that allows you to stay with the pack and not have that dumpster fire that drops you out of it. And man, if you have one more of those, you're toast for the match. I don't know. What do you guys have you guys experienced kind of a similar thing on that?
I guess, I've always kind of operated under if something does happen mid-stage, to just get back onto your original plan as quickly as you can, right? So like if you have a malfunction or something, you fix the gun, and then let's say I had to reload the gun to fix the malfunction.
Yeah.
But I had a reload 2 rounds later planned, right? I'm still going to reload after shooting just 2 rounds out of the gun. So the idea of just, kind of a contingency, nowhere near the level that Eric's looking for. But that's always been the way I've approached that. I think seeing how he's doing contingencies, especially with like activator sequences, was a bit eye-opening for me. Which I've planned for that kind of stuff, right? Like you're running to a position, you've already activated a let's say a swinger, right? Look over there, and if the swinger's available, shoot it, or if it's not, you shoot the paper, something like that. But seeing the way he's planning the contingencies on, hey, like if I miss it on this pass, right? Don't just sit there and wait on it. You have other things to do because you've planned out for those contingencies. That, especially I think when you get into the higher levels, instead of just sitting there for however long it takes to represent, a second, 2 seconds, whatever it is, that's crushing on a stage. You can't come back from that. So having those plans of what to do inside that dead time is huge. So seeing the contingency, something else on his stage planning stuff with the ability to flex. There was multiple times in there where I'd have a stage plan and I'd talk to Randall or somebody else, and hey, I'm thinking about doing this, and I'd be the next shooter or 2 shooters down. I'm like, but I've already got my stage plan. And then he says something, well, you're going to give up 10 match points if you don't make the change. And it's like, are we playing the same game or not? Because I'm not here to come in second place. So you have to have the ability, if you see something better, to make that change without the fear of, well, I changed my stage plan, now I'm going to skip a target, something like that. Like if you can't be at that level, you have to be able to flex and change your stuff according to what's going on based off the hit factor math and all of that, those type of things. So that was super interesting to see and to talk about.
Yeah,
for sure. Because that was something that I had noticed, because Sean, I used to approach stages the exact same way. If I have a malfunction or anything, get back to my original stage plan no matter what, as quickly as I can. Same thing, like you said, even if I have to engage one more target after a reload because of a malfunction, I'm going to reload again. But Eric's standing there and he's like, why not just have a contingency? That way you could literally just plan to have a better stage plan and not lose that second and a half, right? Because I know that happened to me on, I forget what it was, the first day. I want to say it was like the second or third stage. I felt like I ran a really good stage. It felt really good. But like watching the footage now, the first thing he said to me was like, when you shot that activator steel, Like, you were hanging out there for like a second and a half to engage the swinger. He's like, you didn't have to do that. You could have taken something else. But in my mind, I was like, well, if I take anything else, I'm going to have to reload like sooner or potentially do a standing reload. And he's like, why didn't you plan for that? Like, why didn't you plan that contingency? That was super eye-opening for me, because it's more challenging to do that, to plan for multiple contingencies and stage plans.
It is. Yep. I think we one of the biggest takeaways for me was, he said, sometimes I don't want to have to shoot by the rules. He was like, I don't always like to do this. Right. He said, but it works. So I do. And we get stuck shooting the way that is comfortable for us. And that really hit home, because I started thinking about the many, many, many range sessions I've had where I wasn't uncomfortable. I was pretty dang comfortable the whole time. Right. And how beneficial was that for me, looking back, probably not as beneficial as it could be. And it really changes between, are you at the range to have a fun time and, just pull some triggers and make some noise, or are you there to actually put in the work required to get better? And that class felt like work, and range sessions inspired by Eric's class feel like work for sure. But I'm about it. One thing I wanted to bring up was the level of complexity that we had, but just given, the targets that were there. I mean, how many times did he move targets around? And then how many different ways did we shoot that? And how many layers of complexity did he add with that, pretty much the same target array for 2 days almost? I mean, I'd be curious to hear what you guys think of that. If you guys have already been doing that in your training, setting up a bunch of stuff and then just shooting it a ton of different ways, or if that was new to anybody, if it's worth it to always practice that way, I'd be curious to hear what you guys think.
I think that's something that I picked up from last year from him, was the rules of 5. And he made that very clear. If I have X amount of targets with 5 positions, how many times can I run this? Well, I can start here in position 1, go to position 2, then 3, then 4, then 5. I can start at 1, then go to 5, then 4, then 3, then 2. And his idea was to maximize the training time, right? Minimize the time setting up targets, staple in new partials, et cetera, et cetera. So I've tried to incorporate that training quite a bit, as much as I can. Even in a professional setting, me as an instructor with students, right, being able to maximize time behind the gun and picking that up from him. He did not hang many targets and move things around. He set it up in the morning. Yeah. He came back. We shot all morning. We went to lunch. He set it up in lunch. We shot, and then we broke down. I mean, that was what it was. So yeah. You're talking morning, lunch. But the amount of, besides going from, designated target stuff to actual free flow, but, we didn't spend any time worrying about that. It was the capabilities, it was endless, right? You're limited to your mind. He would even ask us, even at a point, which was really cool, he trusted the shooters in this class so much. I remember, he's like, hey, Sean, hey, Donovan, you're calling this one out, popper, open, back popper, partial. He's like, I want to watch the students more, right? So he's just like, you guys go ahead and call it out. You get it. You understand it. It was always about maximizing time behind the gun. And if it wasn't about maximizing time behind the gun, it was talking about maximizing time behind the gun, which was great. I thought it was very well thought out, for sure.
Yeah. I've definitely tried to incorporate that more since last time I trained with him. It almost to the point, if you guys are anything like me, you get the question, what drills should I shoot at the range? Like all the time. Hey, Donovan, what AIWB drills do you recommend? Right? Sean, what what drills are you shooting for USPSA? And people want you to write them a course of fire, right? His stages were very intentional as to what they were working, but it was very much so he set the stage up in front of us. He thought about it for a minute or two, and then he gave us the course of fire, and okay, cool. And that we have that to work with. And so I think, at least for me, I've tried to replicate that as much as possible, set up a fair amount of targets as many or as few as I want, and create shooting positions. And you don't have to only shoot it like you would a stage, right? You can put crazy rules in there that you would probably never find at a stage, right? Like stuff we were doing where he said, you can only shoot all of these targets on the move. I've never seen that in a stage brief before, but it certainly felt like shooting a stage, and it was working. It was working you nonstop on, a freaking 48 round stage, right? And I think a lot of people would benefit potentially from doing more with less setup, right? You don't have to set up a cool USPSA stage. You can scatter targets around and some barrels and some cones or some target sticks and just get, we probably could have shot on that setup for, 2 weeks, right? And before we really felt like we needed to change it up. I think that was really cool.
Yeah, 100%. Because the thing is too, like explaining that to people, at least people of, a certain skill level that can actually get a lot of value out of that kind of training where they have like enough, figured out. It's, I would say it's difficult to, actually, I would say it's not that difficult. Like it's as a relatively easy way to make things difficult, right? Like you don't have to go in SketchUp and like literally design a straight up stage. Like you don't have to do that. You don't even need a notebook. Like literally just grab like 20 targets, throw up, 5 or 6 or 8 partials and no shoots and 10 other targets, and just create 5 different shooting positions and make it random, right? Like you can make it make sense or you can make it not make sense. Like it doesn't really matter, and the thing is, like, that's so much easier than telling people like, all right, go to the range with like a list of 20 drills that or stages or courses of fire that you need to memorize and set up. Like, no, just make it random and, push yourself that way. Yeah.
At one point, you and Murph, right, had the 2 best times or the 2 best hit factors on the stage. And so he actually had you guys design the next stage, right? And he was just like, yep, you can do whatever you want with what's here. And I don't believe you guys did anything except just move around some of the shooting positions and come up with a new brief pretty much, right?
Yeah. So all we did was say that you can only engage opens from one side, from one position. You can only engage partials from the other position. And then you can only engage the steel from the front. That was all we did. And
yep.
We all shot it.
There were a bunch of different ways to run it then.
Yeah. And we started with an unloaded start. And it was like, and even Eric was like, I like this stage. This is good. And it took Murph and I, 4 minutes to like, just think of it.
Yeah.
Like it was, I don't want to say it was easy because it was kind of stressful in the moment. Cause it's like, oh man, we got to think of something like decent, but, it ended up being great,
Yeah. Yeah. That's something I think that's so easy to just plug into training. If you want to train that kind of execution side of things, for sure. So the 2 things that he kind of broke down for us, shooting stages of the first morning and then transitions was the big focus, on day 1 in the afternoon. What do you guys take away from that block?
Shooting is shooting. Everything else, that's what I got from that.
Yeah, shooting is shooting and everything else isn't, right?
Yeah, right. So like for the people that are listening to this, Eric sees Sean shoot. He sees you guys shoot. He sees me shoot. Randall. He's like, you guys shoot good, but you move the gun too slow. Right?
He told me my shooting was boring.
Right.
It's like, man, come
on, man.
And that was like his great explanation between, hammering the trigger 2 times versus really guaranteeing your hits, but moving the gun in between targets extremely fast. I'll never forget the line. Yes, it yields you the same time, and no, one does not guarantee you hits, but the other one does, right? Which one do you want? And the transition side one, well, we could always talk about me when we got penalty shots falling on my face, but the transition side was great because it became harder and harder and harder, but you really, really put the emphasis on, this is what I do on big transitions. I'm working the lower body and the upper body. We're bringing them together as one, and we're snapping it back. And I love the idea of, like, even in the States, everybody talks about modulation and going as fast as you can for a specific distance. Maybe you should slow down to be careful. And Eric, his words are like, why? I go fast as I can. I overdrive fine. I underdrive fine. And then I fix it and pull the trigger, and then I go on. He's like, that always yields me faster times. And I thought that was pretty unique. That's, one of the biggest things I picked up from him. Like, shoot, guarantee your hits. Everything else has got to be as fast as humanly possible. So I love that. I love that.
I found that super interesting as well, that his view on transition, something as big as transitions is, at least in the sport, was counter to everything I've ever been taught or told or learned or done, about, there's no finding a spot and getting the gun to stop precisely on the spot. It's very much get the gun to the next target as fast as possible, and if you have to correct it, shoot the alphas. That I found very interesting. But then you start putting it on the timer, and obviously if I could get the gun stopped precisely at 100% max speed, that's going to yield the best result. But the reality is we live in the real world, and that's not going to happen, right? So when you start trying to modulate that speed and slow down perfectly on every target, I think in the long run, you're going to lose time doing it, right? And you're still going to undershoot and overshoot targets. It's still going to happen. So you're going to have that correction phase anyway. So I think mentality is just get the gun there, correct it if you need to, and shoot. And in the long run, it's going to end up faster, which I found really interesting.
Yeah, Randall will say to you, right? Randall would say, how do you argue it?
Yeah, 100%, right? Like, it's on the timer. You can't.
Yeah, and not only that, the timer's not going to lie, but the results to me are the biggest thing. Like, I don't care how fast you do something. If I do something a little bit different and I get better results at the end, meaning he just doesn't lose. Like, his rules are so defined. And one of those rules is, right, I don't need to pick that spot. I'm there at 100 miles an hour. And if it does happen to be perfect one time, take it. If it's not, fix it and move on. It's very, very interesting. Yep. It's very counterproductive. You very well said, for sure.
It's using his method too. It's almost impossible to really get lazy with a lot of transitions. Like, you feel the push. At least I did. You are really feeling the push between targets of, like, yo, my gun is moving. It is hauling, and it is like leaving this one, and it is, all the way over here as fast as I can get it. There was one, the side, the left side, right? There were two sides set up. And so the left side, we were doing transitions, and each shooter kind of had about 90 degrees to work with. Right. And for the left side, the widest target was an open target, but it was kind of slanted, right? It was kind of angled. So as you come, as you transitioned right to left onto it, you kind of had most of the A zone available. Right. So you were kind of traveling. And so if you overdrove the target, you were actually shooting a low Charlie on the target. Right. Charlie's below the A zone. And a few times, I was really finding myself overdriving when I was trying to push that speed. It's foreign to me. I haven't worked that enough. Right. And I'm overdriving a little bit. And Eric just kind of looks at me. He was like, you have a lot of Charlies down there. And I was like, yeah, I think I'm overdriving. And he was like, yeah, move it back. And I was like, yes, sir. Yep. But he's exactly right. My dot leaves the A zone and parks in the Charlie. Why do I need to leave it there? Make the correction, shoot alphas, and continue to work at that pace. Right. And, trying to figure out what do I need to do to potentially stop it with a little bit more precision, or whatever it is, was, I found myself working that one transition amongst all the others during that one, rep that I had, and was already seeing differences in my shooting, right? When I would really connect with something. And so, yeah, that was a very eye-opening way to work on transitions, because I think the big thing that people look to at the higher levels of shooting that they really need to master are, once they get the gun handling stuff down, grip, sights, and trigger, it's transitions and movement that trips everybody up. And we've all done so much work with mastering transitions, or trying to, and just seeing that there is a lot of meat left on the bone that people leave in the name of consistency, I guess, was pretty eye-opening, that there's still a lot of meat left on the bone. So I definitely thought that was a very, very cool block. And I'm definitely going to be doing more of that instead of just basic target or designated target. Designated target feels really boring now.
I think I put up a video on social media not too long after that, maybe a day or two after I was trying to work on that, getting the gun, pushing hard between some easier targets and difficult, but always coming back to about that 6-inch plate. And yeah, it's a good one. Yeah.
He doesn't leave any room for comfort on those either. It's not like, well, just slow the movement down so that you're a little bit more comfortable entering this, or, just slow the movement down so that this is a little bit more consistent. Just, there's no excuse for that. There's, if you give up that time, then your opponent's going to take that from you. And that's free points, right? What was he saying? Like, your opponent's going to take those points and put it in his pocket. Right.
Yep.
And those are free points because you didn't transition the gun correctly. It's like, well, you can't argue with that.
It's all very black and white. Like the way he presented it, it was just very like no nonsense, no fluff, black and white. Like, why go slow? I want to go fast, and I'm faster than you. So, like, that's how he says things. It's just like, your transitions are slow. You go slow. I go fast.
Boring.
We're boring.
Yeah, boring.
It's interesting to think, like, do all the people that he trains with, is that kind of how it goes, right? Or does he understand the field? Does he understand that Sean took 18th at national? I think it was 18th, right? Top 20 under master class years, other GMs in in the class and stuff. I love that, right? You nailed it earlier, Sean. You're like, he didn't tell me that I pushed 2 Charlies because I have a bad trigger finger and a weak support grip. He doesn't care how you hold the gun. He doesn't care how you pull the trigger. You want to prep it, you want to smash it, you want to roll it, whatever it is, right? You want to hold the gun with your finger on front of the trigger guard like me, or do you want to squeeze it like a clamshell or whatever? The same concept was with everything that he taught. Like, he allowed us to self-diagnose. Like, that's a great instructor. He's just like,
yes.
And it was always why? Why do you think that? Why do you think that? He gave you an opportunity to explain your story. And like me, if you gave him a BS answer and you're like, oh, my brain hurts a little bit, he's just like, not complicated. And then he just walks away. Like, he's letting me know, like, Donovan, you better start training harder. You better make it more difficult because this isn't that complicated. It's almost like, come see me up in CZ land. I'll show you what brain mush is like, And
yeah,
love that. I love that, everything about it.
So one thing that he did that was really interesting that I've never seen anyone do before, including at the last class, was he instituted this little thing he was calling punishment, right? So punishment for missing the steel plate. So to set the stage for all you guys who are listening, we've got, I believe it was 6 papers. So there were 3 opens and 3 no shoots approximately. And then 1 steel plate. What was that? A 6-inch plate or so? It depends on whose house you're in, right? But about 6-inch plate, I think. So, not a terribly difficult target, right? I wouldn't say, but it's definitely, a control target. It's definitely a confirmation 2 target. You need to see your dot in the middle of that thing, right? And if you're pushing the speed of transition, if you're getting a little bit sloppy of just maybe seeing, red on white somewhere there, like missing a shot was not that easy or not that difficult to do, right? So whenever we would miss a shot, he had us what was the first punishment we had to do? It was running to another position, right?
Side to side.
It was running to the
Yeah, you had
opposite
to run to the other
position,
one.
and you had to switch positions and then start engaging that sequence over there and remembering where you were, because it was designated target, right? The plate's designated, you know, plate, paper, miss. I'm going to run over here and start this section. Plate, paper, miss. I've got to come back over, and it's plate. Now pick up where I left off, right? And continue on. And if you miss that, then you are back to the other side and picking up where you left off. And I know for me, certainly I engaged several targets multiple times because it was just so, my mind was so stressed with thinking about, what all was going on, where I was. And then what I realized was that my transitions were the last thing I started to think about. I just started thinking about the order of targets. I just started thinking about, can I actually hit that dang plate, right? It wasn't that big of a deal, for that steal, right? But it became this very difficult task in my head. And what was a very simple drill, hey, shoot designated target on the left side and then go over here on the right side and shoot designated target, became something extremely complex. I thought that was really interesting because it was, every time I made a mistake, it frustrated me, and it was akin to me making a mistake in a stage and then having to kind of scramble and find my bearings again. And I think if I would just make my own training harder like that, I would give myself plenty of opportunities to have to correct little mistakes like that and think on my feet and stay with it, and not, kind of shit the bed. I don't know. What did you guys think of that? And there were several iterations of the punishment, as he called it.
The punishment.
Yeah.
I'll start. Go ahead.
I was gonna say it almost forces you to, right? You mess that up once, you mess it up twice, and I had my fair share of running, especially on the one where you had to run back to the third position and the wide transitions and then go back. I got crushed on one of those, and what you find is after you're winded, you're tired, you come into that position, you're like, do not mess this up. It forces that visual patience. And then like you said, you start thinking about like, hey, what do I actually need to do right now to get this done so I don't have to run back there and all of that kind of stuff. And then you realize as you're sitting there finishing up, you're like, why didn't I just do that from the beginning? And it only further reinforced his, the day one stuff of if you just, everything else is an aside to shooting the alphas, and just pay attention to what you're supposed to be paying attention to at the time, and you won't have to do all that. So that punishment only reinforced that, right? To where it forced you by physical execution to pay attention to the things that you should have been paying attention to begin with. So that was pretty eye opening. I like that a lot. Meanwhile,
you're just getting more and more smoked.
Dude, I came off that one, and I don't think I could have. My forearms were absolutely gassed. I could barely hold the gun anymore, just running back and forth.
The hits on those back, 180 transitions. There were lots of Charlies on those targets.
Yeah.
I watched my video from Justin when I got into the penalty phase where I came backwards to the 180 transitions. And I think I was like rotating 150 and then like, where do I go now? And then rotated another 30 degrees. I was just so smoked. You're right. The progressiveness in the penalties was really well thought out. Even in the first phase, if you were perfect, you still went into the penalty phase because he's like, if you have to reload, you're moving. Right.
Yeah.
And he's like, and even if you finish this side, you're moving, because we had to get both sides done. So he's like, even if you're, darn near perfect and you're hitting, I'm still going to get you to move. I'm still going to get you to reload. I'm still going to try to smoke you. And we're looking at a 15 meter, 20 meter movement. I mean, 50 feet, 60 feet across. And it was taxing. And then he's just like, what do we do next? I'm going to go take 6 more inch plates and I'm going to put them far in the corners. And then you're going to shoot them with offhand only and then strong hand only. And he's like, I'm teaching you guys that when you shoot these super demanding targets, you better guarantee your hit, because if you don't, this is the type of price I want you to remember that you're going to pay, right? And in the training, it's like you're going to work hard, but in real life, it's you're going to lose. So you better start figuring it out. And he drove that home. There's no doubt about that.
Man,
Yeah.
I remember the one where you had to move backward and you had the 180-degree transitions of both targets. Man, I think I went through 3 or 4 mags, and I will never forget at the very last position, I was almost done, and I got to my last transition and I went to slide lock. And then I had to go back again. I think I went back like 6 times or something. I don't know, but
Yep.
and so he had brought in a different element to this whole thing, which was also planning. Like I remember for that one, he was like, everyone shot the one side. Even I think Randall shot it clean, but then he moved back to reload and then did that. And he's like, that wasn't what I told you. Like, I didn't tell you you had to do that. So he also
And everybody watched Randall do it, and everybody did that also.
Right.
Yep.
Exactly. And so Eric was kind of injected a bit of like the gaming and planning side of things, right? Which I thought was incredible, because he's like, what were the rules? What were the rules? You only have to go back if you miss the steal or reload. That's the only thing. So if you didn't have to do that, why were you doing that right off the bat anyways? Because if you planned it out, right, the 2-2-2, that was 6 rounds. And so for, I know Randall was shooting, well, I think Randall was shooting same, cat magazines that we were, but, you had to plan that out. So if you had to move backward, that was another 6 rounds. So then next thing you know, like I was just reloading, like just completely absent-mindedly. I'm like, I don't even know what I'm doing right now. I'm just reloading because I feel like that's what I should be doing. But it was really cool to see him inject like planning into that kind of an exercise too.
Yeah. And that's a hard drill. It's a hard drill for folks to follow, right? But essentially we were doing a designated target with a little steel plate, right? The punishment was running backwards to a point up range, 2 targets at 180, and you had to do 2, 2, and 2. You had to do 6 rounds, right? But everybody finished, and if you shot it clean, I think it was like 19 rounds, and everybody had at least 19 round mags. And so everybody shot about 19 rounds and then just immediately ran back to shoot the 6 so that they could reload going into the next position to have enough rounds to finish. But almost everybody then had to, everybody came back and shot, right? And reloaded on the way back and came back up, and they still had to add in another run, whereas you could have just emptied 19 rounds, shot it clean, moved directly over with no reload, emptied the last 5 rounds that you had, run back, reloaded on the way, shot 6, and come back up and finish it off, and you would have cut out an entire traverse.
That's all we had, bro.
Insane.
Yeah, that's
Easy.
it, man.
Not one of us thought about it. Not one of us. So yeah, really fun. Donovan, I know you might have to dip out here a little bit early before you go.
I just got a text. I'm okay. The wife just.
Oh, are you good? Okay, fantastic.
I'm hanging. We're hanging for a little bit.
The shooting on the move block, right? I know I do not practice shooting on the move like I should. Not nearly, right? I end up doing a lot of static, then move, then static shooting. I think I felt like it was eye-opening to see how much work I can do with shooting on the move, and watching the absolute demonstration that he put on of, several times running one of those large stages, and the way he moves through and how much control he has when he shoots on the move. Anybody who watches his stages or watches him shoot knows that shooting on the move is one of his strengths, and he does it extremely well. What did you guys kind of get out of that block? And what can we be incorporating into our training from that aspect of it?
I was surprised at like, I would say half the targets we had set up, I would never think of taking them on the move, right? Pretty much every partial we had set up was, I don't know, 15 yards or past, and some of them were extremely tight, right? That one in the middle had an inch of body A zone and then the head box, and the requirement of the drill is you had to take all the paper targets on the move. So it put you in a position where it was forcing you to do it. And then we get done and I think most of us are dropping 5, 7, 8 Charlie, something like that out of 48 rounds, shooting all these targets on the move. And you step back and look at that, man, am I exploring this enough because obviously capable of doing it. So if you're capable, why aren't you taking those kind of targets in the match on the move? And in my mind, it's because I haven't explored it, right? So you're put into a position where you have to explore it, and now you learn some things. So now the targets that I'm going to train on shooting on the move are going to be more difficult to get that confidence level up. But I know for me in a match, I'm looking at stages much differently on what I can shoot on the move. And as long as you have that control, you can still shoot the required amount of points on it. So that was really interesting, being forced into that position to shoot targets on the move that I would never consider shooting on the move.
Yeah, I think I do. I think I shoot on the move enough, but it's not difficult enough, right? So do I shoot a lot on the move? Yes. Could I always do more? Maybe, sure. But like Sean said, he was having us shoot partials that were incredibly difficult. I know I wouldn't do it in a stage setting. I just wouldn't, because I wouldn't assume the risk. But for him, it didn't matter. For him, it's like we're training, right? We're training.
Yeah.
It happened and why. And you nailed it, Brennan. You said watching him put on just a display of, and even when it didn't work perfect, where he kind of backed up to one into that one target, he's like, it won't happen again. Right? Mistakes happen. But when we do it next time, I'll fix it. And no problem. Like, he does what he needs to do. But he moved, like, this goes along with the lines of transition, right? He transitions harder than anybody I've ever seen. His movement is so hard. And what I mean by hard, like high levels of speed, where most of us are throttling a little bit more. We all of a sudden we're open target. Yeah, we're moving. And then 3 partials present itself. And all of a sudden we just kind of throttle down a little bit more. And he's at like the same pace, right? But he's just more careful, more into it. He's just, he's Eric Grauffel. It was very, very cool to see. And I did like the little exploration side in there, like Sean said. There's no way I'm taking some of those on the move. I just wouldn't. There's just no way. But I need to start incorporating the difficulty into the movement way more. No doubt about it.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so when we ran all those stages, specifically like the 48 round stage, right? If you apply his rules, his hit factor math rules, which I won't go into detail, I'll save the secret sauce, but we all know, like, on that exercise, I think it was a max amount of like 12 Charlies or something. And so when you break down how many freaking partials there were, like, you literally could only ever take Charlies on partials, because that's the amount of risk that you never want to assume the risk of always, double alphaing a super tight partial, right? And so one thing he hammered on too was like, and I want to say almost every single person in the class, like, you have like a 7-yard open that you're taking on the move. We all went, gah, gah, bah, bah. And he's like, did you guarantee 110% that those are alphas? Because every once in a while we'd throw a Charlie and boom, like one of those Charlies on an open target is 100% unacceptable when you adhere to his hit factor rules. The math, it's math, right? And that was super eye-opening for me, because like at a match, right, you see that and you're like, oh man, confirmation 1, like, I'm out of here. And then you come and it's like a super tight Charlie and you're like, oh, well, whatever. But when you start like adhering yourself to those super strict hit factor, math rules, you're like, okay, I need to move aggressive. I don't need to slow down anymore. I need to move aggressive, but I need to be way more careful on the targets that guaranteed alphas, and then be able to only shoot Charlies on those partials. That was super difficult.
100%.
Yeah, that was it's interesting because I think 10 years ago, 15 years ago in shooting, at least here in the US, you had the idea, right? Slow down, get your hits. That was kind of the overarching thing, right? Learn how to shoot accurately and speed will come, right? We've since learned that that's not how it works. But I almost think, and you listen to Eric and his rules and the application of them, it's almost like shooters here have gone 100% in the opposite direction to where it's go as hard as you can go and the accuracy will come. And then you start to listen to the way he talks about it, and you drop 2 Charlies on there. Why, right? What are you paying attention to? What are you focused on? And if you have to slow down to shoot those alphas, you have to slow down to shoot the alphas. It is what it is. So I almost think greatness in shooting kind of lives somewhere in between these, right? Where we've gone too far in the wrong direction to where now it used to be 100% accuracy. Now it's 100% speed. And the dudes that are winning are shooting a high level of alphas. Now it's not slow, right? They're not shooting careful, I would say. But it's, like he talked about, guys over here are all in all the time. And his analogy of you go to Vegas and you win, right? Stage 1, you do good. So you just double down on the bet. And he's like, you keep playing that game and you're going to lose, right? Eventually you're going to lose that. And that was super interesting, seeing that, right? Like shooting on the move, right? Hey, you shouldn't be double tapping any of these targets, even if it's that 7-yard target, right? See the sight, call your alphas for both shots on every target, because the math says you can't afford those Charlies. And that was a bit eye-opening, I think, for me and my perception of where shooting and training is currently in the circles that we all run, right? We've all seen just, speed up, speed up, speed up, speed up, speed up. It's like, well sometimes you got to hit stuff too. It was interesting to see his take on all of that. And then you see him work it out mathematically. And like, again, like Donovan said it, like how do you argue with it, right? Like you can't. So that was super eye-opening for me.
And he's shooting the right number of points per second, right? Like,
right.
And that's the balance is the hit factor, right? And so that's where I think his rules come into play so perfectly. Is he knows based on the stage how many points per second he needs to shoot.
Yep. He doesn't care about 12 splits, which is sad,
but he does them often
when he needs to, right? But what I picked up from him was like, and if you watch him, if you're subscribed to his content, he doubles all the time. 100.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
The more that I pay attention, I don't see many doubles on the move unless he's like, I'm talking contact distance, 3 paces and in maybe, right? Yep. So for instance, where did he really, really like hammer this home to us? You remember that free flow U station? He hits that middle portion where there's like, I think 5 or 6 targets, a couple partials, and we're hitting that coming in, in Alpha Charlie, Charlie Delta. And then he comes in moving harder. So he's making up time right there. There's your 10 points. He says that's in your pocket. I'm going to move faster than you. But he's just bop, 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 bop. And he's just 100% seeing everything. And that's where it really hammered home to me, right? It was very unique. He's right. He's like, you're moving. You're adding complexity. And if you're not ready for it, why are we doing it? And that hammered home for sure. It was very unique to see. Guarantee it. Keep moving. Move faster. It's like it's a win-win recipe. How do you argue it?
For sure.
Yeah. And on those open targets, the left side had kind of a row of open targets. The right side also had a fair share of open targets. And like you guys were saying, everybody's doubling them. But when he kind of gave us that feedback and people started, maybe moving more aggressively and shooting with more control, I don't think anybody gave up any time, right? The times were the same, probably identical. But I remember a very distinct difference between my first run and my second run. My first run, it was, I'm trusting what I know I can do with this gun. Put the gun over here, park it, and blah, right? And I'm going to get a pair that are nice and close wherever that dot parked. But that second time, I remember feeling very much in control, going dots here, dots here, dots here, dots here, dots here, and calling that shot with real precision. And walking back, I knew exactly what all my hits were over there, and it was, there was, these 2 targets, and I failed to call my shot, really well on these. Right. But it changed some of those things that we would maybe just go, hey, well, shooting fast is a strength, right? So I'm just going to reach over here and just hit that really fast. I mean, you don't have to. So if you don't have to, don't do it, because you've got to meet the point requirement for the stage. But yeah, I wasn't seeing like a big time difference. I think there's a big time difference. It makes me feel like there's a big time difference to split the gun hard. But if you don't have to, then don't do it. Use it, let it be a tool in the toolbox that you can pull out and use when you need it.
What did he say? You want to earn yourself the right or the privilege to shoot slow, something along those lines, right? Mm-hmm. And you earn that right or privilege through good movement, right? Whether that's transitions or movement itself or whatever. But the goal is to be able to shoot slower and still win, because I can have that much more control over the shooting and the points. I thought that was also an interesting point. It's a cool way to look at it.
Mm-hmm. So I have a question for you guys, and I might be opening up a can of worms, but it's good. So a conversation I had with Howitzer Kim on the way to dinner one night, the day before our class, so the class that he was in the day before us. When I was asking him like how it went for him and some of his thoughts on the class, one of the things that he said was opening his eyes to a different kind of practice and training. So we kind of already touched on this a little bit, right? Setting up target arrays and everything else. But what he was talking about specifically was in the last, a couple of years, because he's been teaching so much, he has structured his practice in a lot of isolation, a lot of isolated things to test theories and to build curriculum and all that kind of stuff. And he still runs stages in his practice, but it's not to the extent that Eric does, right? But now seeing, the way Eric presented the class and his kind of practice was more geared towards like a competitor and not so much as an instructor. And so, we got instructors in here, so I figured I would love to hear your guys' thoughts on that. And the question that I'm posing more specifically is, do you think that there's value, more value in where we're all at right now as shooters, but also as instructors to practice in execution mode all the time? Or should we explore still a little bit or do things more in isolation like transitions, or like how do you find that blend? And I know, Donovan, you had asked, it was either you or Buck, but you had asked Eric this at lunchtime on the first or second day. But I'm curious to hear your guys' thoughts on that.
I do remember that specifically. Buck's actually the one that asked it.
Okay.
Yeah. I remember chiming in and giving my opinion when we were all talking in the circle. I'll revert back to the other world champion, good buddy of mine, JJ. And his theory kind of is, one, to answer part of your question, yes, I think we need to explore. There's no doubt about it. I think the ability for me to see as fast as I'm able to see, maybe pulling the trigger now, would never be there if I didn't explore faster movements and stuff like that. Also, I think it's validated by Graufffel's training, right? We just spoke about it and how hard we were moving on partials we would never do. I would never even think about doing. I would almost do the training and say, I'll never do that in a match. Why would I even try it now? Like, that's how difficult it felt to me on some of the things. So for sure, I think we should. I think JJ nailed it for me when I asked this question to him a year or so ago. He said 70-30. I'm 70% practicing my execution mode, my match mode, or whatever terminology you want to use. I'll spend 30% of my time, potentially getting out of my comfort zone and doing things that aren't comfortable in nature. And then as the match comes closer, it dials down to about 90-10. It has to, because I need to stay away from going fast. I'll even share a story here in a second about it. But and then the last part is, like, whatever it is, 2 weeks out, 3 weeks out, it's all execution mode because I'm prepping for the match. I don't think you're going to change much that close to the match time frame. So I'll revert that answer to him. I think that's great knowledge. I had two students. I was just in Michigan teaching. They messaged me. They shot a match last night, and they said awful, and I was like, question mark. And they go, we were so mentally drained, and we did a little bit of exploration. I think we still were shooting in exploration mode. It didn't work out too well, and we had a conversation about when to push, when not to push, and they said, now we know what you're talking about. Because I'll quote JJ and give credit where credit's due on that part. So. In a real short answer, 100%. We definitely still need to explore to make new plateaus and push our boundaries. I think you just need to be very wise about it in knowing your own individual skill set and when you can deliver and when to dial it down, et cetera, et cetera. And that'll come with experience for sure.
Yeah, I think right, if you take like a C class shooter, right, I think they're going to get less out of the style that we were training versus, the class that we had, because do they have the technical ability developed to a point to where they can shoot the alphas and they're just not, or do they not have the technical ability to even shoot them in the first place, right? And that's a big difference, because if you're trying to adhere to the rules but you don't have the technical ability to shoot the alphas in the first place, there's no way that you can live and die by the rules that Eric put out, right? So there has to be some level of development to wherever you are. And then, I totally agree with JJ. How you structure that in relation to the matches that you're shooting in your season and all that, right? As you get closer to the major matches or whatever you're doing, it's more execution and less exploration. But there's got to be that isolation and exploration, especially for the lower level shooter that you are, right? And not that there isn't that as well for the higher level guys. There should be, I think, probably less of a ratio than the lower level shooter, but there's no way to develop it without that isolation and stuff. I don't see it being realistic.
Yeah, I think every single person in that class has done a tremendous amount of exploration, working mechanics and engagement speeds and everything in between, everything that we know that makes up shooting. We've all done or had all done a tremendous amount, and some maybe even a lot more than others for some of those, for some particular things, right? And so I think, but I'm interested. I'll have to figure it out as time goes on. At what level does that change, right, for the shooter? At what level do you really start focusing more on execution? But what was interesting was, yes, our class was very high level shooters all around, I think. But at the same time, there was a fair amount of skill gap between the shooters, even just in our class of 8, for sure. As far as like, even if we just look at, match placements or whatever, or, USPSA rankings or whatever it is, there's certainly, I'm not shooting on Sean's level by any means. I'm not shooting on Randall's level by any means. And the class last year was the same. There were, a few people that were definitely not shooting at the level of the most talented shooters at the class. Right. And yet, even though there was such there was still a pretty big skill gap, everybody was benefiting from learning how to train in that style. And so it's interesting. I think when maybe for me, I think I'm coming to the conclusion that when I start to see diminishing returns on some of the stuff that's comfortable to practice, it's probably a good clue that I need to be working on executing and applying those skills to something more difficult versus just trying to shave another, 500ths of a second off of, my draw or something. That's I think how I'm beginning to look at it. And I think that's important to know too, for students that come through our classes as well, understanding what level they're at and what they need to be practicing.
Yeah, that comes down, I think, huge to prioritization, right?
Yeah.
Which part of your training lacks, which part of it excels, right? Identify the weakness, and like you said, if something's standing out to me, I'll pay attention to it. If not, maybe it's time to make it more difficult. I got a question, guys. I got a good one.
Go for it.
My benefit. I would say I was definitely on the lower end of the totem pole when it came to performance side of shooting there. And it's interesting to hear you guys talk about how uncomfortable you were and mentally drained on some of the drills. Specifically, Justin, he said, I took 3.5 minutes, and Eric's like, what are you doing? Let's go type thing, right? And, top 20 finish nationals and other national contenders, master class shooters. Justin, correct me if I'm wrong, Southern Illinois or Southern Wisconsin title, right?
Yeah.
right? So very established shooters. Have you ever been to a match where you felt more uncomfortable than you did in one of Eric's drills? So I would ask, think about the most difficult drill he put you in, and when you were trying to plan it, was there ever a time on any other stage, on any match, where you felt just as uncomfortable or maybe even more? Or would you say Eric's was more demanding as far as the mental side goes?
I think
Not nervous. Not nervous. I'm saying like,
yes.
You know,
so two different types of
right.
For me, two different types of mental stress, right? Eric presented something that was mentally, I would call mentally difficult, right?
Mm-hmm.
So like planning it out, finding a route through the stage that, according to the rules that he gave, was mentally difficult. The only thing that I have close was nationals last year, first time on the super squad, first stage of day one. Hugely, for me, it was hugely mentally tasking to stay in the game. You know, with all the guys that I've looked at shooting coming up, you got JJ and Nils and Max and everybody standing right behind you. It's your first time. Do you belong there? Or do you not? Equally mentally taxing, but in a different way, if that makes sense. And outside of that, as far as difficulty, straight difficulty planning and shooting, I've never been presented with anything as hard as what Eric did. But that example would be the only equivalent I can draw from an actual match.
So it would be like, for you specifically, Sean, it would be safe to say, like, you know, making ready in front of us and in front of Eric, not nervous. Making ready, you know, first stage nationals, definitely nervous. But when it comes to preparation, like Justin stated, and I'll let Justin give his piece next, but, you know, he's like, I was not comfortable. I was not ready to run this stage, but I knew I just had to deliver. I would imagine that on most stages, you know, with the 5-minute walkthrough you're getting, or more time, depending, give or take, like, you're going to be more prepared than what Eric's up for. You know, that's what I love about it. So I wanted to hear your guys' take on that. I loved it. Definitely two different sides of the nervous mental game for sure.
Yep.
Yeah. So for me, I would agree as far as like the actual technical, or, you know, the technical aspect of shooting, like the actual shooting difficulty. I've never encountered that at a match. Now, keep in mind, I've shot like 5 or 6 majors in my life, so I've very, very limited major match experience. So take that for what it's worth. I've only even shot like 40 matches in my entire life, so keep that, you know, in mind. But as far as like the actual shooting difficulty, the class, Eric's class was the most difficult like shooting I've ever done, by far. I think as far as like the actual, I think like the pressure, or kind of mental fortitude, I think Area 5, that was the first level 3 major match I've ever shot. I shot that last year. That was pretty taxing for me. That was the first time I ever shot, you know, more than 13 stages. And I believe it was 18 stages or 16. I can't remember exactly, but, you know, shooting 3 days, it was like, wow, this is a lot. And so being able to experience that, like day 1, day 2, day 3, like what Eric was talking about, you know, what is your mindset going into those? That was a little more challenging on the mental side of things. So yeah, I don't know if that answers your question, but yeah, that's kind of what it was for me.
Yeah, just, you know, one of those things, like, is this the, you know, the most uncomfortable, more demanding shooting you've ever done? And I get the idea of being in the spotlight and being more nervous, and I wasn't more gearing it towards that. It was just me taking into consideration where you guys are at, and how much experience you guys have, some more than others, but, you know, how you felt on the mental side versus how prepared you were when you ran maybe one of your toughest stages that you might not have ever forgotten. And it's that both of you are already at the, yes, that was the more difficult thing I've ever done, which is, it's cool to hear, you know. How about you, Brennan?
Yeah, in my opinion, like stages almost always have a pretty clear way, or several clear ways that you can shoot them, right? So part of that is, you know, having fault lines and understanding how stages are designed, understanding that there's going to be forced shooting positions. So, if there's some sort of fault line that comes out to a point over here, often, Timbuktu over here on the left side of the stage, and there's some sort of vision barrier, I can be pretty sure that we're probably going to have to go over there, because there's probably a target that's there that can only be engaged from that position, right? And so that a lot of times I think, very much helps with stage planning, or really dictates stage planning. With Eric's class, almost all of the stages had a lot of options, a lot of different ways you could shoot them. And I think for me, that kind of got in my head a little bit of, well, what's the right way, And so the easy way out is letting Sean go first, right? And then just copy his stage plan, right? Or let Randall go first, and then let Eric, chew him out a little bit, and then, take some notes. That's the easy way out. But I think for me, I have to work on approaching each stage as if I'm going to shoot it first, right? And and as if I'm not going to have the benefit of seeing anyone else. And I think that's the mental exercise that I need to exercise more often, in order to get better at that. But I would say the stuff we did with Eric, certainly much more challenging in terms of planning than any stage I've ever come across. Because even with the most complex stages, and for me, that was probably Carry Optics Nats last year, some of those stages, just thinking about the different ways I could run them and trying to shoot to my strengths and not just trying to copy somebody else, that I saw. They all had, a couple of different clear ways that I felt like you could run them. And it was just kind of deciding between, well, do I want to do A, B, or C, right? And not going, okay, there's no A, B, or C. I've just got to kind of chart my own path through here and think conventionally and think outside the box. That was challenging. But I think the more you do that, the better, the easier other stages are going to become. And the more unconventional you think about stage playing is probably a pretty big benefit at times. So certainly the most challenging thing I've ever had to do in terms of planning. And yeah, there's a lot of pressure as well for me. I very much felt at the bottom of that totem pole, also, Donovan, and understanding that there's some pretty heavy hitters watching, and the world champ watching as well, and evaluating you on your decisions. That adds a lot.
Yeah, he has a tendency to add, you talked about ABC. I think Eric added XYZ in there somewhere on those. Sure.
Yeah. I'll never forget. It was day 2. It was the big U stage. We were almost done with the 2 days, and I stepped up. I think I was one of the last shooters. I stepped up. He goes, "Brennan, are you next?" I said, "Yep." He goes, "Okay. Do you have your plan?" And I said, "Yep," very confidently. And he goes, "Are you sure?" And I looked at him. I was like, "Yep." And I was like, "I got this." And I made several mistakes. And at the end, he said, "I thought you said you had your plan." And I was like, "You're right. I don't have it. I don't have anything to say to that."
Yeah. I can tell you, I've never been as uncomfortable as I was getting ready to shoot some of those stages at the class.
Yeah.
Straight uncomfort. It was not. There was never a point over the 2 days where I was like, "This is pretty easy. I got this." Every drill, everything we shot, I don't know what I'm doing right now.
Yeah. Nobody was not taking advantage of their walkthrough.
Yeah. Well said. Well said. You guys definitely answered that one. I appreciate the good feedback. I was just as uncomfortable. There's no doubt. I just want to hear some more experience where you guys sat. So it's good to know.
Yeah. Anything else that's worth bringing up before we wrap this one up, guys?
Well, if Eric ends up seeing this, I'd like to just say thanks. He was a stud. He was a rock star. It was a pleasure learning under him. I look forward to furthering my education and getting back to seeing him again. He's done wonders for my game for sure. So appreciate that, Eric. Thank you.
Yeah. He has a lot of training content like online. I mean, just go on his Instagram page and just watch him run like stages. That alone is homework material for a very long time. But with CZ Academy and everything, he has a lot of training material that you could take advantage of. It's obviously never going to be as good as, an in-person class, but he just doesn't do very many classes in the States right now. So if you're listening to this and you want to kind of get the taste of it, like, just try and find as much training material as you can, because he has a lot of it out there.
Cool. I think, yeah, I'm excited because it's super fresh. There's just so much that I can do before next year. And there's even just so much that I know, like even right now, starting to change the way I'm, or have been training, even just, for a few major matches this summer. Right. I'm just excited because it gives me homework, and it's not often that I get homework in such large stacks, which is, and I know all of us feel the same, right? We're always looking for homework, but generally it's this big, right? It's like, all right, I identified one thing that I could do, maybe from match footage, maybe from talking with other shooters. But I feel like all of us left with this much homework to just to work through. And for the people who have the drive to succeed, I think that gets us excited. So, yeah, I'm very excited about it. I appreciate you guys hopping on here and chatting about the class. I think it was a great time hanging out with you guys. Sean, it was my first time meeting you, and a couple of the other guys on the squad as well. It was a good time, and certainly well worth the investment. So if you guys have the chance to train with Eric, be sure to jump on that. Be prepared to work hard, and be prepared to have your views challenged, and I think you'll get a lot out of it. So before we go here, guys, Sean, you're teaching classes, right? People can look up your schedule. Donovan, same thing for you guys. You guys want to just plug what you're doing here real quick before we go?
Go ahead, Sean.
Yeah, so GriffithShootingSolutions.com. It's got our class schedule on it. I think we've got at least a class every month till June right now. Florida, South Carolina, Tennessee. I'm just kind of getting into it on the private side. So I have a gun and I'll travel anywhere you guys want.
Fantastic.
Same thing over
Donovan.
here. Point1tactics.com. West Coast, East Coast, all over. If you got a host or a range and you're a host, you want to bring our team out there to come train, I'd be more than willing to come on out and get after it with you. So you can look it up, and we'll be all over this year, which is fun. So I'm excited. Hopefully I'll see you on the range.
Excellent. And yeah, guys, just from personal experience, I vouch for these guys. It will be well worth it to invest and train with these guys and get their experience and get their take and get their coaching as well. For our stuff, gateway-defense.com, you guys know the drill. We're teaching all over the United States this year and excited to be doing it. I will leave links to all this stuff down in the description of the show. Leave their Instagram handles. Go follow them. Watch and learn. It's a good thing. Follow Eric. Watch his stages. Be impressed and inspired. Until next time, guys, this has been the Gateway Defense Podcast. Keep practicing shooting, and we will see you on the range.